And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
This was a subject that Bracken, you kind of came across. It was one that I think we were both vaguely familiar with, but I'm kind of disappointed that I was vaguely familiar with it, especially given, well, the family ties as well as how close we are to them. So you want to go ahead and introduce the Borgstrom family and their story?
Yeah, so I guess to start, like you said, we were vaguely aware of this story. I think growing up, when the movie Saving Private Ryan came out, we had been told that that movie was loosely based off of some ancestors or relatives of ours, and that's about all I really knew or had heard growing up. And that's probably same as you. So we knew that there was kind of the circumstances of a family who had lost multiple sons in World War II, and kind of the storyline of Saving Private Ryan. So when I was just in December, so this is probably 3 weeks ago, probably the week before Christmas, we just took our kids to. They just have a local little Christmas village where Santa Claus is there, and they have a little Christmas houses decorated where the kids can go walk around. And we just went there with some of our neighbors, some of our friends, just here local in our local town. And it's in front of I guess it's the city hall. I think that's what the building is. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a cool old building. But in front of it, they have a big statue that is a monument to all of the fallen soldiers from the county that we live in. And on each side of this statue, on each side, there's different plaques highlighting the different wars. And so I always look at signs, and my wife makes fun of me because I always read the signs when I go places. But I was looking at that, and I noticed that there were 4 names for World War II. There were 4 Borgstroms. And it kind of stood out to me because our great-grandma, so our mom's grandmother, she was a Borgstrom, or Bergstrom, like you said. And so I was like, I wonder if these are the guys that we're related to. So I took a picture of their names, sent it to my mom, like, hey, are you familiar with these guys? And she kind of had the same knowledge that we did, that, well, great-grandma Stone was a Borgstrom, and I think we're related. And so over the next day or two, our mom and I kind of did some more research, searching back through our family history a little bit and trying to figure out the connection or the tie that we have to this family. And it got confusing for a couple different reasons. One is because their name is Borgstrom, B-O-R-G, and our grandma is Bergstrom, B-E-R-G. And so as we looked back through our family history, our grandma, some of her siblings were Bergstrom and some were Borgstrom. So then that's where there was some confusion, like, well, are we Bergstrom or Borgstrom? But just, I think throughout their life, some of them's changed to Bergstrom just for simplicity, to simplify Borgstrom. I don't know if Bergstrom just sounded a little bit more American. I don't know exactly why, but they changed the name a little bit. So we discovered that, and we kept going back and discovered that these Borgstrom brothers were actually our first cousins 3 times removed. So they were first cousins to our great-grandmother, and they grew up in the same small rural farming community as her. So I'm sure she was she died when I was 4, so I vaguely remember her. But I'm sure she knew them very well as her cousins. But so her grandfather and their grandfather is our great grandfather.
Right.
And he in the early days of Utah and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he was a polygamist. So he practiced polygamy. He had two wives, and from one wife, our line comes down, and from the other wife, their line comes down. So that's where it got confusing, tracking it all back. But we figured that out, that we have the same great grandfather. Would have been the Borgstrom brothers.
And that's pretty wild, though,
so
that
that's kind of
they were first cousins, our great grandma and the Borgstroms, the Borgstrom brothers. Yet our great grandma spelt it Bergstrom with an E, and her first cousin spelt it with an O. So, I mean,
well, some of her siblings even spelled it with an O. Some of her siblings are with an O. Some of her siblings are with an E.
So you can get the confusion, though, where I think talking to Mom, she had thought we were distantly related because of the difference in spelling, when in reality we were pretty closely related. They just, for some reason, they spelt it differently from each other.
Very closely. Yeah, and then it got confusing just because our lines come same
different moms,
father, but two different wives. So the Bergstrom brothers' father was half brothers, you could say, with our great grandfather, because same father, different mothers,
awesome,
but same family. So we were able to figure that out and realize, like, we're very closely related to them. And then as I started to research more, because I obviously love learning about our ancestry, and then World War II, I always love learning about veterans of World War II or people who served in World War II. Just have like a lot of respect and honor for them. And so now, knowing how closely related, I want to learn more about these brothers and this story that it really isn't well known. And I discovered a book that was written by Mark Hudson. It's called So Costly a Sacrifice. And this was written, I think it was in 2022, but this is the first time their story really was actually told, and it's a pretty remarkable story.
In case anybody wants.
So you can see on there the forgotten story of the Borgstroms, the only 4 Gold Star family of World War II. So there's a couple other families, and the book mentions them, but I think are more well known. Yep. I think there's the Sullivan family, maybe from Iowa, but they had 5 sons on the same ship. The ship was sunk, and all the sons.
Yeah, we've actually got a post about the Sullivan brothers on our Instagram page, if you want to go see that. So
okay, yeah. But yeah, so the Borgstrom, so that they were a five Gold Star family, but the Borgstrom family was the only 4 Gold Star family. And if you know the story of Saving Private Ryan, they had 5 sons serving at the same time, and there was a huge petition to get the 5th son home
after the 4 had died already.
Since after, well, actually, it was 3 had died, and they were pushing to get the other 2 home, and then they got word that 1 was missing in action, and later found out that he had died, and so it was just the last one son that came home. So that's kind of the. I ordered the book, read the book, learned all of the stories of the boys as well as the family. I think it's super interesting. The book does a great job of not only talking about the stories of the boys and where they served and how they served, but also the family and community and just what a toll it took on them as well. So that's where I learned that. They were from a very close town to where we're from, so we're able to go visit. Yeah. We're able to go visit. They have a big monument where the boys are buried, and some other monuments throughout town. We were able to go see all of that.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's get into it. The story of the Borgstrom brothers, and what makes, the author in this book, So Costly a Sacrifice, about the Borgstrom brothers. What really drove him to write this book? I mean, he wasn't an author beforehand or anything, but was because of.
Not at all. He was an army veteran.
It was really the recognition that they don't receive, the Borgstrom family. And you and I understand that completely now because we're related. We've grown up 15 minutes away from where they're from, and we didn't know their story in depth until just recently. And so I think it's super important that we bring their story to light and try to get more people informed about what this family did for our country and what they sacrificed for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to make these stories known and understand, and maybe going back to where you talked about changing the name to the Patriot Project and maybe a little bit of pivot or a rebranding. I think we live in such comfortable times and such we it's easy to forget the cost of freedoms that we enjoy and what sacrifices people have given, willingly given, to enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy. And we are so blessed and have so much abundance that it's easy to fall into just thinking that is just given because we haven't known any different. And many people have, but I think there's a lot of people that haven't had to sacrifice that to enjoy it. So I think it's important to highlight stories like this of people who understood the sacrifice required and willingly made that sacrifice. Not only the boys who went to war and fought, but
Yeah,
the families as well
absolutely.
back home.
So let's talk about the Borgstroms. So the parents are, I hope I pronounce it right. So Albin and Gunda. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. And so we're related through Albin's side, the father's side. That's how me and Bracken are related. But so Gunda, the mother, she was an immigrant from Norway. She's a Norwegian immigrant. And Albin, he was either a second or third generation immigrant. I can't remember, but one of the two. But they settled in what's, and still today, Little Thatcher, Utah. Just a small little town in northern Utah, right next to Tremont. That's kind of the more well-known town that it's right next to. And so they still a small town,
Still a
yes.
small town,
Growing,
though.
but it's very small still. And so Albin and Gunda, they settle there. They have 10 kids, and seven of them are boys. And so we know that their oldest son, Viren, I hope that's Varen. Yeah, forgive me if I pronounce these names wrong, but at 10 years old, he died. His appendix ruptured, and he died. And so early on for this family, they know heartache and struggle through, losing a child, losing their oldest child. And so from there, though, we get the rest of the boys. So 6 more boys come along. And so do you want to kind of take it from there and talk about the boys?
Yeah, and you'll have to help me keep track of who comes where. But there's
He's the
Leroy,
oldest.
right? He's the next oldest boy, and there was obviously they had some daughters in there as well. But Leroy was the next oldest boy, and then after him was Clyde, and there was a pretty good age gap between them.
No, it was Leroy
right?
and
5
Clyde
years
were
or
only
so?
2 years apart, but
Okay, they were 2 years, and then a
Yeah.
gap between.
there was a 5-year gap
Clyde
between Clyde
and-
and Boyd,
Yeah.
which Boyd's the third one.
Okay. Right. So Boyd's the third one, and then after Boyd, there were twins, Roland and Rulon, and then after them, they actually had another son who wasn't old enough to serve at the time, and his name was Elton. So those are the boys of the Borgstrom family, and then they had 3 daughters as well.
So, and to kind of paint the picture here, from what I understand, the oldest, the surviving oldest, so because we talked about the oldest, Varen, had died.
Right.
The oldest, Leroy, and the third oldest, Boyd, they were really close with one another, from what I understand. They were pretty inseparable, and I believe they joined at the same time and went with each other.
I don't know if it was.
Was it Clyde?
I think it was Clyde.
Oh, you're right. Yes, it was Clyde and Boyd.
Together.
You're right.
Leroy
So
was
Clyde
the
and
oldest.
Boyd, the second
yeah.
and the third oldest, they were really close with one another.
So they enlisted together. Right, Boyd, I think, graduated high school. They enlisted together pre-World War II. This was before the war, or at least before the United States had entered the war.
And so then they enter before the United States has gone to war, but then we go to war, and at that point, the oldest Leroy also is sent to war as well. But interesting. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't remember. Do you remember? I'm trying to remember if he enlisted or if he was drafted, because it talks about how he the rest of them, they all grew up hunting, obviously, a small community, but he
Yeah.
always hated guns and didn't want to be around guns. And I don't remember if he enlisted once the
I
war
can't
broke out
remember
or if he
either.
was
I kind
drafted.
of think that he
I can look up
enlisted
that
just so
detail.
that, because if you enlisted, you could, kind of more
Yeah,
pick which branch of the military to go to, and he decided to become a
right.
medic for that very reason. He hated
So he
guns.
didn't
He
have to
didn't
carry a
like
gun.
hunting when he was growing up, whereas his younger brothers, that's what they did for, for fun growing up. They were
Yeah, they
really
loved it.
good with a gun. The younger brothers growing up, that was one thing that talked about how it served them well, um, because they grew up shooting all the time, so they were a really good shot. But yeah, the oldest Leroy, he did
Yeah.
not like guns. He did not like hunting or killing, so he became a medic.
hmm it also talks about how, just talking about how Clyde and Boyd enlisted together. It talks about, I believe it was Clyde that was home on leave when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and the news broke out, and we knew we were going to war. And it talks about, that's kind of where you first kind of get some of the emotion from
Yeah,
Gunda, the mother, about waiting for I'm sure he was out, I don't know, working on the farm or something, waiting for him to come home, knowing she had to send him
yeah,
off to war once Pearl Harbor
right.
was bombed. So
And so yeah, you can imagine that moment for that mother. Like, she's already lost one child, and now this massive war that's broken out across the world, she's having to send her other children.
yeah, she has two sons that are enlisted, another one that's of age that will enlist, and then
If the
those
war's
twins
still
were
going,
in high school,
yep.
a year or two
And turns
away,
out the war was still going, and uh, Roland and Rulon end up
hmm
enlisting
They
and
enlisted
going and fighting as well. Yeah.
right out of high school. Yeah.
So I guess I struggle to like figure out which direction to kind of go with this, because the tragedy doesn't happen until 1944, and it so happened.
Yeah. I guess we can kind of give like a brief overview of what happened and then go into the details of each one of the
Yeah.
boys. But yeah, so in 1944, within a 6-month period, 4 of the boys were killed in action in World War II. And then, like I mentioned before, there was a big petition to get Boyd home. But it was a massive, um, obviously, to the family, just a lot of turmoil. It talks about in the book how a telegram would come in, and then the telegram man would have to deliver it to the family, and just how Gunda, the mother, just became so paranoid every day. Just, is another one of
Yeah.
my boys gonna die? It wasn't like she found out all at once. It was found out one, and then a couple weeks later found out about another, and then so it was a lot for her over a 6-month period, just living in this
Yeah.
complete
Well, and you had,
turmoil.
every time she'd get, the telegram. Yeah, it, I don't know if it was it the postman that would come and deliver it, because I know they're.
Yeah, so it was the postman, and then he would
Yep.
he would go get the bishop, the
Yep.
local bishop, to
Yep.
come deliver it with him. And I think eventually he just delivered it to the bishop and said,
Yeah, I can't deliver
I
another
can't
one to this woman. Yeah.
see that woman anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well,
so that's kind of a brief overview, and then we can maybe talk about maybe in detail the boys, and then also what was going back home with the family and the community, and even
yeah.
local congressmen
So
and stuff.
we'll fast forward to 1944, and so we're not that far out from the end of the war, really. Um, and
hmm
we have Clyde. Clyde is the first one to pass away. Clyde was the second oldest, and he died in the Guadalcanal out in the Pacific. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
and just real like when I heard that, like, oh, he died on Guadalcanal. You hear these stories of Guadalcanal, what a crazy fierce battle it was, and how many Marines were lost on Guadalcanal fighting the Japanese to take possession of that island. And so you think
Yeah.
like he died like in combat on the front lines, but then you read the story and
Yeah,
it's
because
almost heartbreaking to
he
learn like
had fought there,
how he actually
right?
died.
He'd fought there and he'd survived
Yeah.
these horrible battles. But and just correct me if I say anything incorrect here, but they were clearing basically runways for their planes to be able to come in.
Yeah. So it was after we'd taken control of the island. We were trying to clear runways to. It was a very strategic
Hmm.
position in the Pacific to be able to take off and land and to fight in the Pacific. So we were trying to make as many
Right. And
airstrips
in
as
the
we could.
process of that, they had to cut down all these trees and everything. And a tree gets cut down, and Clyde doesn't see it, and it hits him on his way down, on its way down, fell on him and
Fell
kills
on him.
him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, and maybe you caught this more in the book. I don't know how much combat he actually saw on the island because he was
Mm,
an engineer with the Marines. So I don't know if he saw a lot of combat on the island or if he came in after the fact
yeah,
to start, doing the demolition
yeah,
and
it could have been.
construction there. So I'm sure he saw combat and was involved in some things, but I don't know that he was on the front lines, battling all the way through
Right,
Guadalcanal. I think he came in a little after the fact as a support crew to
right. But
start
just to your
construction.
point, if you've read or know anything about the battles in the Pacific, I mean, they were horrible. Um, the conditions they were in, as well as just fighting the Japanese. The Japanese were very much, you don't surrender, like you fight to the death. And I can just imagine as a mother to end up finding out that that's the way he went. It had to have been a gut punch. That
Yeah,
it was just a freak accident.
yeah,
It wasn't fighting the enemy.
yeah, yeah. A
Yeah,
tree fell on him, clearing land. He was cutting one tree down, and some other Marines next to him were cutting the other one down, and
yeah,
fell the wrong way. So that was the first son that Alvin and Gunda got the telegram that
and that
they
was
had
in
lost a
that was in
son.
March of
Lost
1944. And then the second son
Uh-huh.
that passes away, but the oldest that's enlisted, Leroy. So he was the one
Leroy.
serving as a medic because growing up he didn't like guns, he didn't like hunting, and so he was serving as a medic. And now, generally in war, if there's an injured soldier and a medic comes out, they have an armband on, a white armband with a red cross, and it signifies to the enemy this is a medic. And technically the rules of war is you don't shoot and kill medics. Well, he was apparently helping a
Yeah.
soldier that had been injured, and he was shot and killed. And so I don't know much more of the details behind that. We probably won't ever really know. But if it was somebody that just didn't care about the rules of war and shot the medic anyway, so another heartbreaking way to go.
Yeah, there's not a lot known about
Yes,
his.
it
I
was
believe
Italy.
it was in
Yep.
Italy that he died. Um, but really, and even through all the research for the book that Mark Hudson did, only thing he was really able to come up with is there was a note that had said that he was carrying a fellow soldier
Hmm.
to safety when he was killed. So, and so you can imagine the family back home has, already learned about Clyde's death, a freak accident, and then Leroy, who's a medic, who is not
Right.
supposed to not be a target, and he's helping a fellow soldier trying to save a life, and he is targeted and killed. You can imagine kind of their confusion, their frustration, their just sadness that's how he was killed. Like the book kind of explains it is like they can't comprehend why someone would take a life of someone
Yeah.
that's trying to save a life.
Yeah, and this is in uh, Leroy dies in June. So we have Clyde dies in March, and now Leroy in June uh, of 1944.
So 3 months.
So yeah, you can just imagine these poor parents, especially this mother, now receiving news of their second son.
Yeah. So, and going back, I believe Leroy was around 30 years old. So Clyde would have been
Yeah,
27, 28
Leroy was
when
born in
they died.
1914, so yeah, in 44 he would have been turning 30 in
Yeah,
44.
so 30. So they were you could say maybe a little bit older, but then you get to the twins who had just enlisted,
And
really,
mind you, you still have Boyd
right out
at
of
this
high
point
school.
that's out there serving as well.
Yes. Yep, and Boyd actually was sent
North.
to right after Pearl Harbor. He was sent to Johnson Island, I think, out in the Pacific, very vulnerable spot, right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, kind of to watch out for, protect Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands, and make sure there's no other Japanese invasions. And so he was in a very vulnerable spot very early in the war, and he served there. I can't remember how long he served there, and then he came back stateside, and he was getting ready to deploy to Europe, but he was in South Carolina, North Carolina, at a base there in North Carolina. So he had seen, I don't know how much combat he saw, but he definitely served in the war, and
he was in
some precarious situation.
Places, definitely.
Very early too, when there wasn't a lot known of what was going on, then kind of the war in the Pacific was very unknown, and so he was in a vulnerable spot that had it been a target, I think he could have died too. Really.
Yeah. So Boyd's out there serving still. His two older brothers have now died, and then his two younger brothers, the twins, Roland and Rulon, they're now enlisted, and they're fighting as well.
So they're 19
fresh out of
years
high
old.
school.
So they enlisted at 18, went to basic training, and
So
19 years old.
We'll go to Roland. He was in England, and I don't know exactly what his title would be called, but he was a fighter.
Tail gunner, right? He was the tail gunner in a bomb. So there was a crew. I don't remember how many guys, 8 to 10 guys, maybe crews of 8 to 10 guys in these bombers that would go on these bombing raids, and then they would have gunners on every side of the plane to fight other airplanes from the enemy that were trying to take them down. So he was a tail gunner in their plane, and the story is they were assigned to one airplane. I can't remember what it was called, like Miss Peaches or something was the plane that they were assigned to, and they had done multiple bomb raids. And in World War II, these pilots and these bombers were required to do 50 missions. If you survived the 50 missions, you went home, and it was such a high risk role. And so they had done multiple bombing raids in this one airplane.
I thought real quick. I thought it was like 24 missions. Did I read something wrong or interpret something wrong?
I don't know. Maybe we can fact check that. Maybe maybe I'm wrong. We can look that up. But so they had done multiple successful bombing raids, and on one day they got switched to a different airplane. It was called the Flying Log because it had taken a bunch of damage previously, and they repaired it. And part of the repairs is they put a telephone pole in the fuselage of the plane. I don't know if it was kind of to structurally hold it together, but basically they were sitting on a telephone pole as they're flying this plane. There's some pictures in the book that you can see. So this was their first mission in this new plane for whatever reason they were assigned to, and they took off with the group, and they were flying in formation, and one of their engines went out or wasn't running properly, and so the pilot pulled out of formation because they weren't far away from the base and were flying back to the base to try to land the plane because the plane wasn't working properly. Obviously it's a sticky situation because this plane is full of bombs as well, so you got to be careful landing it. and as they were trying to land the plane, it crashed, and
Yeah,
there's the massive.
it ends up
massive
nosediving on
crash.
him, right?
And no one survived.
And from everything that the book
Yeah.
talked about too, it wasn't anything that like a pilot error as far as the nosedive and crashing at the end. I think it was what ended up happening to the plane, the mechanical error.
Yeah, it was the plane. It was mechanical malfunctions of the plane. Crashed, and it was a big explosion,
Yeah.
and no one survived on
And
the plane.
in fact, there is some. It does talk about there was a soldier, I think, that had written a letter back to somebody talking about the site after that plane crash had happened, and there was just body parts everywhere. I mean, there wasn't any chance of any
Yeah.
survival.
Yeah, and there was actually, I think, some people, some correspondents got back to Gunda kind of about the circumstances and situations from other mothers who had written to, I think they knew someone that was serving on that base or near there, wrote to him to get some more details on what had happened, but it was just a horrific crash, a mechanical malfunction of the airplane that killed all of that whole crew. And Rulon was one of them, right? Is that, I can never remember which. Roll
Yep,
on.
Roll
Roll on.
Yep.
Yeah, they were made it confusing. Those
So
names,
now Albin and Gunda,
so he was the next guy.
now
The
Albin
three
and
have
Gunda
died.
get their third telegram, stating that they've had another child that has died in the war, and so it was at this point. Was it at this point that kind of petitions started?
Yeah. So the community got involved. Obviously, local congressmen in Utah got involved. I think the governor of Utah got involved, trying to petition to get their remaining two surviving boys home. I mean, they had already lost 3 boys. They were seeing, the community was kind of talking about just the distress it was causing on the family and on the mother, and even concerns that she wasn't going to survive because of just the tragedy and distress. So there was a large petition to support this family, and get the remaining 2 boys home, and it grew so much that it actually got to FDR, Franklin Roosevelt's desk. Letters from congressmen, and there was actually even, I think, just in newspapers throughout the country, this story kind of came about, and I think there were just people throughout the country who saw the story, read it, and wrote to the president that, hey, this is the right thing to do for this family. And there was actually, and you're going to have to, and maybe you don't know this, we'd have to go read it again, but a law was passed basically because of the Borgstrom family about, I think if you lose 2 family members, I don't remember what
it
the
was
law
either 2 or
is exactly,
3.
but there was a
I
law
don't
passed.
remember the number. But also, so at this time, she's lost 3 now. She's lost 3 sons. And her daughters decide to take her basically for a camping trip to just try to get her, to get her mind off of the tragedy, because it talks about, obviously mentally she is not in a good place. It says multiple times, I think some of the letters to even FDR state that they're worried about losing their mother in this as well. Like she's not in a good place, as you can imagine.
Yes.
And they're up Brigham Canyon, I believe. And that's where it's at this point it's the middle of the summer. And so, I didn't say, so Rowan, he dies in early August. And so you have March, June, August. And so it's middle of the summer, it's super hot. They go to Brigham Canyon because it's cooler there, just hoping to get her mind off of things. And while they're up there, a plane flies overhead, which for back in that day was super rare for a plane to fly over.
Yeah, 'cause you didn't have all the commercial airplanes flying around
and
like you do now. So
that kind of sets her off, and it gives her this inkling and feeling that she has another son that's gone. And she they end up having to take her home because she's kind of beside herself, and it just triggered something hearing that plane overhead. And so they go back, and I don't know how many days later it is, how after this trip, but they get another telegram saying that Roland's twin, is missing in action. Right?
Yep. Yeah, so you can imagine. So this is after there's petitions to get these two boys home, and obviously the family is behind it. Like they want their remaining surviving sons and brothers to come home. And shortly after this all starts is when they learn that Rulon is missing in action, and just the way news traveled back then, it wasn't instantaneous. So you hear this, he's missing in action. So then it's just
Weeks.
this waiting game of, is he alive? Is he dead? We don't know. Have we lost a fourth? We don't know. Hopefully he's alive. I'm sure praying and hoping that he's alive. But just, yeah, you can imagine.
And that was pretty much,
torture.
I mean, getting they're missing in action. I mean, it was pretty much they're killed. They've died. But
Right.
there was that glimmer of hope.
You can think. Yes, it's not confirmed that he's dead. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he could be alive. We could be getting a telegram that he's
And so
alive. So I'm sure you don't want to close
and
the
so
door on that
it's
hope.
once they get that telegram saying that he's missing in action, where the petitions to let Boyd, the only surviving son in the war right now, to get him home, and this is when it really, really heats up.
Yeah, and he initially, I think, when he learned about his third brother dying, I think he requested leave at least to go home and see his family.
Yeah.
And that leave was denied. So there were attempts to get him home, which initially was denied, and I think the Marines got some backlash as the story kind of grew a little bit.
Right, and so it's before they finally give Boyd that they release him, but it is confirmed. They get a telegram that Rulon was killed in action, and it was in France, and it was right after D-Day, right? So he came into Normandy.
Yeah, it was.
But it was after the initial invasion, right?
He was fighting through France. Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of detail on him either, on his death, other than he was in combat in France shortly after D-Day, so he was, in those initial waves fighting through France. And across Europe, he was killed in a battle in France.
So these parents now, they've had 4 boys that have given their life for their country, and at this point they grant Boyd, the only surviving son, a release that he can go home.
Honorable discharge.
And it was interesting because when he was in North Carolina, and he had to ride a train home back to Utah. I think it said he stopped in Chicago and had to catch another train there, but he didn't want to arrive home in his military uniform. And so when he was in Chicago, he left the train station, went and bought some just normal clothes. Yeah, just a suit. Misses his train that he's supposed to catch. And so everybody's gathered in Ogden to see his train come in, and train comes in and he doesn't get off, and everybody initially is kind of panicking, like, why isn't Boyd here? And it ends up finding out that he'll actually be here tomorrow, not today, and it was because he missed his train because he went and bought some clothes because he didn't want to arrive in his military uniform.
Yeah, it talks kind of about his mindset, the psychology there. I think a lot of World War II veterans saw those who didn't come home as the real heroes. I think him losing 4 brothers not coming home, he didn't want to get any sort of hero's welcome or anything like that. And if he showed up, in his military uniform, he would, be honored, as he deserved for his service, but he didn't feel that he deserved that, and that his brothers truly were the heroes, and so he didn't. He kind of wanted to be
Yeah.
incognito, I think.
Yeah,
Coming
and
home.
we'll talk about him a little more, but definitely that I think it probably started probably before even his release, but some survivor's guilt, because
Yeah,
his four brothers all died, and
definitely.
why am I the one that didn't?
Yeah. I think it's interesting too. This goes way back, and if I remember right, it was Leroy before he was deployed, and he learned of Clyde's death, and he was getting ready to deploy, and I don't remember the term, but he went missing from base. He didn't report to base a couple of different times, and there was some punishment and correction for that. But obviously, eventually, he was deployed and served. But that's just
Yeah.
a detail that I remember is him learning about Clyde's death. It
Was
was
it Leroy or
so.
was it Boyd? Okay.
I think it was Leroy. I'm pretty sure it was Leroy because then he ended up.
Yeah,
There was
solitary
discipline for it,
confinement
and he wasn't able to. Yeah, and he had to do
twice.
solitary
One
confinement a
for
couple different
10 days
times.
and then another for
For I
30
think
days, I think.
yes, and I think he was just trying to process Clyde's death and grieve Clyde's death. Um, so just the impact it not only had on the family at home, but the
Yeah.
brothers who are out serving as they're getting news that a brother has died, another brother has died. Just the toll it took on them, and like you said, we'll talk a little
Yeah.
bit more about Boyd. Um, just the
Yeah.
impact it had
So
on him.
they've lost four sons to the war, and kind of one of the main not points, but main themes of the book is it talks about the stars in the window. So a family that has soldiers that are fighting, they have hanging in their window, I don't know, service flag,
Service
yes,
flag.
and it's a blue,
That's how the book
right,
was inspired.
and
Actually, that's
so you have a
yeah,
star for each member of your family that's serving, and it's a blue star. But if they die in battle, that blue star becomes a gold star. And so you can also see Gunda is having to change these blue stars to gold stars, every time she gets this news. And Rulon, the last one that passes away, he actually dies. Let's see here. Rulon died.
they were like the twins were
Yeah,
like a
they
couple weeks
were
apart.
17 days apart from one another. So Rulon also dies in August.
Yeah,
So you have March, June, and then two in August. And each time, that blue star changes to gold. I mean, you can imagine the heartache and just I don't know mentally how you do it, honestly. Especially as the mother, as the father, as Boyd, as the brother. That's got to be just so hard to process that and to deal with that. And it's not something that we think of our trials in life and stuff, and most of them are temporary, right? We get through it and it goes on. Like, this is something though that this is forever. This the rest of their lives. These four are gone.
yeah,
So
yeah. Kind of, and to paint the picture a little bit, you can imagine this family with 10 kids. I think a lot of the growing up there were 9 kids, 6 boys. They lived on a farm. There was a lot of work to be done, so they worked together very hard on the farm. Spent a ton of time together. It was probably a loud, rambunctious house, and then just for that to be lost with each of these boys passing away, and then the
yeah,
responsibilities of the farm just falling more and more on Alvin as an old man, and then as on Vernon as a young kid,
yeah,
14, 15 years old. Just yeah, the difference, a lively, rambunctious, thriving home just kind of slowly turns into this very
yeah.
somber, quiet
It
place
and back
that
then
had
too, a lot of
difficulty.
I mean, not it wasn't the sole purpose, but a lot of times the reason you had bigger families, more kids, was so you had more hands to help on the farm and to be able to
Yeah,
provide for the family. And it talks about, that was, the boys worked very hard. They worked the farm hard, and then they would go and they'd work other farms to get paid money to help the family. So it's not just the mental and emotional things that is really tearing apart and destroying this family. I mean, now they're also losing a lot of their livelihood. Being able to keep up on the farm, being able to continue to put food on the plate.
Yeah, it's just hard to fathom.
Yeah.
The toll that it took on the family, on the community, on everyone. So moving forward past after these 4 boys died, Boyd has come home. It's not till they all passed away in 1944. The war ends, and it's not till 1948 that they're able to get all of the bodies and remains of these boys home. And I think families were given the option of service members who were buried overseas. They were given the option to leave them overseas in some of those military cemeteries that we have overseas, or to bring them home. And they wanted to bring them home, but Albin, the father, he wrote requesting that they all come home at the same time. They didn't want to go through all of that again, having one arrive and then having another one arrive. They wanted them all to come home at the same time. So it wasn't till 1948 that they were able to get them home. So 4 years later, this is after the war, and their funeral was a very big event, especially for the small town, but a big event. There was representation from every branch of the military there. I think it was General Mark Clark from the Army was there. President Joseph Fielding Smith, the prophet of
George
the church,
Albert Smith,
came to
Yeah.
it was George Albert Smith. He was in attendance at the funeral, so it was a big event where they had a funeral for them, and then a procession to the cemetery, and a big event to honor the 4 Borgstrom boys who had given the ultimate sacrifice. And you can imagine for the family, 4 years later, they're still in turmoil, but maybe some time has healed some wounds, and then kind of going through it all again. Getting the boys home and having a funeral and actually having their bodies there. It just had to be kind of open those wounds right back open.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was such a large event that they actually had to give out tickets to get in. And one of the craziest stories from that funeral is Gunda, the mother's talking to what's his name?
Mark Clark.
Yeah, General Mark Clark. And he's over like.
Is that who you're talking about?
He's over is it like recruiting for the Western United States, basically?
I believe so. I don't remember what his exact.
He's a high-ranking official.
But had a very much influence on who serves where.
And after the service, they were, I think, having lunch, and Gunda is sitting next to him, and then Albin, the father, is sitting just on the other side, and Gunda talking about their youngest son, Eldon, who didn't serve because he was too young.
He would have been, 17 or 18 at this time?
She asks him basically, if another war breaks out, are you going to send another one of my sons to die? And General Clark says, as long as I'm in charge, basically your son will not go overseas and see combat. Like they'll keep him stateside, keep him safe. And Albin, the father, overhears the conversation and steps in and says, no, if he's called, he'll serve his country. And I mean, that takes some stones. I mean, I'm sure Gunda, she's probably, I don't know, maybe wanting to slap him in the moment, but she's lost 4 boys, and she basically gets confirmation that, we'll make sure that you don't lose a 5th son if another war happens. And Albin, and we talk about the difference in our generation today and that generation back there. Albin steps in and says no. Like, if his country needs him, he will serve. I mean, that's just, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first heard that story, I think I had the kind of the reaction that most people do, like, okay, he's crazy. Like, that's a little bit extreme. I think I had that reaction. I think a lot of people do. But going back to what I said earlier, is there is a sacrifice required to have the freedoms that we have, to live the life that we live, and he understood that there's a sacrifice and a cost to that, and he was willing to pay that sacrifice, whatever sacrifice was necessary. And it sounds extreme, but I feel like coming from, his wife was a first generation immigrant. He was, second or third generation immigrant, and they sacrificed a lot to come to this country, to build the life that they had, to enjoy the freedoms that they enjoyed. And so I think that he was just so much more connected to understanding that, that their way of life came at a cost, and didn't want to make the sacrifice, but if it was required, we were willing to make the necessary sacrifice for our future generation.
And it is when you put it that way, like, it makes sense. First generation immigrant, second generation immigrant, they realize the blessings that have come with coming to the United States and living here. Whereas, when you say it and you just think of it on its face, you might think, well, wouldn't their loyalty maybe be to their country of birth? And you think about our generation today, where most of us, it's 8, 9, 10 generations that have been here. Wouldn't we be more entrenched in defending our country and standing up for it and fighting for it? And I feel like you've seen the opposite of it, where, because you've been here for so long, you've taken you've partaken in all of the great opportunities that comes with America, so you take it for granted. So there's not that feeling of pride and patriotism, whereas people like Gunda, like Albin, where they knew what it was like somewhere else before, and they realized the blessings and opportunities that it is to live in the United States and to defend it and to support it. And so it's just interesting to see the dynamic, because, you bring up a good point as to why their attitude was the way it was. Whereas, we talk about it's very different today in a negative way, I would say. And I think it's for that very thing. People just take it for granted. They like to look for things, negatives, why isn't, our government or country doing this or that, and it's not helping me, and it's like they don't recognize the opportunities that this country does provide, whereas those early immigrants, man, they recognize those opportunities, and they are so grateful for them.
Yeah, and I think recognizing that there's a cost to everything, and sacrifice is required, and it's so easy to feel like that maybe we don't have to make that sacrifice. Like, oh, someone else will go fight that battle, someone else will take care of that, someone else will do that, and then we get to enjoy the fruits of that sacrifice, which we're so blessed, because many people, that is how it is. Like, we really aren't required to sacrifice a whole lot. There are others who put their lives on the line to allow us. In
our bloodline, we can point directly to these guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's easy to get into that mindset that, these are just given, and I'm entitled to these rights without being required to make the sacrifice. So I think too, just Albin making, that claim. I think his line was, "We won't make any deals. If our country needs him, our son will serve." I think just kind of from a parenting perspective, like, What's the
Yeah.
youngest son's name? Eldon. Kind of like, okay, he's not going to get a free ride because
Because his
someone
older
else made a
brothers did. Yeah.
sacrifice. He needs to have his
Yeah.
experiences as well, right? Like, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just kind of thinking through it. Like, did it make him appreciate more what he had and recognize the
Yeah.
requirement to have what he had? So I don't know. That story, I've thought about that story a lot, and kind of what we're talking about, just freedom and sacrifice and the cost of freedom, and really how fortunate we are. Like, I think in my life, like, what sacrifices have I really had to make to live the abundant, blessed life that
Yeah.
I live? And I, like,
Yeah.
don't have an answer,
At least an answer
right?
that
So I
would be
think
laughable
so.
compared to the rest of these guys.
Right. Exactly. And this isn't just talking about ancestors. There's people today that serve in our military, armed forces, first responders, who put their life on the line to secure those freedoms and are willing to sacrifice that. So I don't know. I've just thought about it a lot, and makes me more grateful and indebted to
Yeah.
them than maybe I had been before, learning the story of the Borgstroms and the sacrifices that they made, but so many other
Yeah.
families and individuals
And
have as
you
well.
know the unfortunately for this family, they buried the boys finally in 1948. The tragedies in this family doesn't stop there. Um, we talked about Boyd.
Yeah.
He's living with this survivor's guilt. He ends up getting married and having some kids, but he has this horrible guilt, and he turns to the bottle, drinks a lot, and really ends up leaving his family for a long period of time, essentially abandoning them. But it is interesting too, because while he was gone, they didn't know where he was for a lot of the time. Um, Gunda and Albin really took in his. Well, she ends up divorcing him, his ex-wife, and his
His
children.
family.
But eventually, Boyd comes around, changes his ways, gets remarried to his ex-wife, and
I think this was in like
yeah,
1973, so
yep. And
decades later.
so he changes his life, comes back into his kid's life, and starts being the father that he should have been, and that they wished he would have been, and his family's life starts to really improve. But I think they'd only been remarried for, I think it was 2 years, and then Boyd dies.
I think it was a year.
Yeah, it was a year or two. He dies in 1975,
Yeah.
and so that I think he was 53.
Okay.
Died in his sleep.
Died
Yep.
in his sleep.
And
Yeah.
so and it's
Yeah.
hard too, because it's initially, and especially in our generation, it's easy to be like, man, what were you doing? You just ban your family, we're drinking. But when you talk about everything that happened to his family, and especially to him, it's like, yeah, I don't know how I would have processed that better. I don't know how I would have dealt with that really any better than he did. I hope I would, but it's not my
Yeah.
place to judge him, because it's, man, that was such a horrific thing to be thrust upon him, and to deal with it for the rest of his life too.
Yeah, like, I think initially it's easy to think like, oh, he's the lucky son that survived, but almost kind of the opposite. He Imagine his four brothers' deaths, the guilt that he survived, and that he didn't get deployed because his four brothers died, right? He was ready to get deployed. So he didn't get deployed, almost got out of that service. I wouldn't say got out of it, but in his mind,
Yeah,
like,
that's maybe how his mind thought about it.
and then he's got to come home and pick up the pieces of his grieving family and parents. He's got to come home and be the oldest brother, be the rock, be probably help do all the
Mm-hmm.
work on the farm. Like, I just can't imagine everything that he dealt with and that he went through, and especially the survivor's guilt of my 4 brothers died. I was about to be deployed. I didn't fulfill that service that I was supposed to fulfill because my brothers died. So, man, that had to be a lot to process. So, kudos to him for figuring it out and going back to his wife and marrying her and recommitting to her and amending relationships with his children as much as he could. At least that's how the book portrays it. And I'd love to talk to members of the family.
Yeah,
we're related to him. So
and again, I mean, and then Eldon, the youngest son, I mean, he dies in 1980, and he was only 50 years old. So,
yeah,
I mean, you just have, tragedies in this family, and it doesn't seem like it ever lets up. It ever did let up. But I think it's so important that we talk about them because, I mean, like I said, I'm embarrassed that we're that closely related. We're only 15 to 20 minutes away from where they're from, and I didn't know all of these details about them. I just vaguely knew, about the Borgstrom family. And so, but I think it's so important that we tell these stories. I mean, how is a 4 Gold Star family not something that, it's something that should be, in my opinion, it should be taught in history classes, in the elementary age. That's the Borgstroms. That's a name that I think should be recognized in, all households throughout the country. Now, the interesting thing is I can say that, but those that actually served in it and stuff, a lot of times they don't want that recognition and glory. And I can understand that, but I feel like it is our duty to recognize the sacrifice that they paid for us, for everybody in our country, especially that mother and that father and that family.
Yeah, I think it's important to learn about history and history like this, like I said before, just to understand sacrifices that have been made on our behalf. And it's so easy to forget that, or to become entitled, or to just expect things. But recognizing that there's, I mean, the name of the book, So Costly a Sacrifice. There's a great cost to us living in such a prosperous time that we live and having what we have. So that's kind of what has been on my mind since reading the story, learning the story, reading the book, is just recognizing sacrifices have been made, and I hope I don't forget that. I hope I can remember that and learn more of them and honor them the way that
as
they
well
should.
As if, heaven forbid, we get thrust into something ever where a similar sacrifice is asked of us, that we're willing and able.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and that's a hard thing to say.
Yeah, it is.
You don't
it's
know
really hard
until you're there, but so many courageous people. I think that's one of the things that draws me to World War II, is just to see how young men and young people, really, men and women, rallied, and families rallied for the cause.
Well, and how close we are
our
still
great
to
country.
it.
Like, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's not
Civil War and
far,
Revolutionary War, that's so far away.
A lot of these guys died in, like generations that we knew this generation, right? Like, you talk to your grandparents, they were raised by this generation. There's not a lot left alive that served in World War II, but it's still so close to us, and it's so forgotten. So, like I said, I think it's important to learn these and to make these stories known, and just to recognize and understand how blessed we are because of the sacrifices of others.
I agree. Well,
it's not just history that you learn in a book, but it affects our lives directly.
Absolutely. Well, I would definitely encourage anybody to go and to read that book, So Costly a Sacrifice, by Mark Hudson, just detailing the story of the Borgstrom family and the Borgstrom brothers. It'll give you definitely a sense of gratitude and pride in what the and what the earlier generations have done for our country. And I hope it ignites, more patriotism and pride as well, just to, that we're willing and able to answer the call for our country as well. It's for most of us, hopefully for none of us, it's going to be the sacrifice that the Borgstrom family, went through. But I hope that we're just in a place where we have enough love and pride for our country that we're willing and able to sacrifice for it. So,
yeah, I think it's love and pride for our country, but also just for our families, for our future generations, for those that we love, for the way of life that we have, recognizing how unique and blessed
yeah,
that is.
absolutely. To teach our children that so they understand it. I mean,
Defending that.
you have young boys,
that.
it's crucial and important that you teach them growing up about these stories to instill patriotism and pride in them. And for me, I have all girls, all daughters. I definitely hope that as they get older and, they eventually get married and stuff, that they find somebody that grew up with those values, that understood and appreciated the sacrifice that others made for our country and for us. So,
yeah.
But, all right. Well, do you have anything else to add about the Borgstrom family, or?
No, I would just encourage you to read the book and learn for yourself. Also, just Mark Hudson, like the research that he put into this, and putting all this together, just gratitude to him, appreciation for that, for me to understand. I mean, my family, my ancestors.
Yeah.
So thank you to him for that, because had he not done that, I would have done some research and discovered how I was related to him, but I wouldn't know the story like he portrayed it and
right.
all of his
Yeah,
research.
absolutely.
So
absolutely. He did a phenomenal job. So, and if you want to go see, if you live in Utah, you can head up to Tree Mountain and go see their, the cool memorials they have for them, as well as see their graves. It's a pretty cool thing to go and see and experience. So, I'd encourage anybody to do that is close enough to. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for jumping on, Bracken, and talking about the Borgstrom brothers. And hope our goal is to bring more content like this. We want to just really highlight these people that were true patriots, that were willing to sacrifice. The ultimate sacrifice for the love of their country, and truly made a difference for you and for me and for everybody. So hope you guys like this one and tune into future ones that we're going to do, because we've got some cool stuff, I think, planned for the future.